so that we may understand who among them possessed the knowledge of the ritual. Sotai, with a twinkle in his eye, began to recite the names of those wise individuals. Chandavargeva, a Brahmana of great repute and born in the lineage of Chaivana, was the Hotrai or chief priest at the sacrifice. He was renowned for his mastery over the Vedas. Sotai continued. Kotsa, an elderly sage, was appointed as the Aditrai, who would chant the sacred hymns. Jamini and Sarngarva were named as Adivarius, while Vesa, accompanied by his son and disciples, and Udadaleka, Pramateka, Switektu, Pingalat, Azita, Devala Narada, Parvata, Atreya, Kanajadara, Kalaheta, Vetsia, Srutasrevas, Kahala, Devesarman, Mogulia, Samasareva, and many other learned brahmanas, all became sadisys at this sacrifices. The Ritwiks began to pour clarified water into the fire. A terrifying spectacle unfolded. Snakes, their bodies writhing in agony, fell into the flames, releasing a noxious stench that filled the atmosphere. The cries of the snakes, both those fallen and those still airborne, created an unbearable din. Meanwhile, Teksheka, the prince of snakes, fled to Indra's palace, seeking protection from the king of the gods. Indra, I have erred, Teksheka, confessed, and I fear for my life. Indra, pleased with Teksheka's humility, reassured him, Fear not, O prince of snakes, for I have appeased the grandsire on your behalf. You are safe, however. Veskai, the king of snakes, was consumed by sorrow and grief. His family was dwindling, and he saw no end to their suffering. Summoning his sister, he spoke with a heavy heart. My limbs burn, my sight falters, and I fear falling into that blazing fire. Our sacrifice is aimed at eradicating our kind Astika. Your son must put an end to this sacrifice. The grandsire had foretold this, and it is now time for us to act. Vesikai's sister listened intently as her brother entrusted her with a crucial task to persuade their son Astika to a distant land where the sun dipped into the horizon and painted the sky with hues of crimson and gold. Sotai began to recite an ancient tale. The story revolved around Astika, a young Brahmana, and his extraordinary journey to save the snakes from a terrible fate. According to Sotai, Jaratru, the sister of Veskai, the king of the snakes, had bestowed upon Astika's father a gift, herself. This union bore fruit, and Astika was born. But little did they know that this birth was connected to an ancient curse. Kedru, the mother of all snakes, had cursed her sons for refusing to falsely represent Achkaisrev as the prince of horses, leading to Veneta's bondages. The tale unfolded. Sata revealed that Vasikai, the king of the snakes, had sought protection from the gods. When the Amrita was being churned, the gods with Vasikai had approached the grandsire, pleading for his mercy. Brahma replied, Jaratru will take unto herself a wife of the name of Jaratru. The Brahmana, born of her, will relieve the snakes. Vasikai, in desperation, told Astika that he was the chosen one to save them from the impending doom. He explained that his mother's curse would be fulfilled, and they would all perish in Janamjaya's sacrifice unless Astika intervened. With a deep sense of determination, Astika vowed to protect his uncle, and the snakes, as Sotai continued his narration, became clear that Astika was not just any ordinary Brahmana. He had a heart full of compassion and a mind filled with wisdom. When he arrived at Janamjaya's sacrifice, he was refused entry by the doorkeepers. Astika, undeterred, used his spiritual powers to persuade them, and eventually he gained access to the sacred compound. With a gentle yet firm demeanor, Astika began to adore the king of infinite achievements. The Ritwiks, the Sadisys, and the sacred fire. His presence was like a balm to the afflicted snakes, and his words were infused with blessings. As Sotai concluded his tale, it became apparent that Astika's journey was not just about saving the snakes, but also about upholding the principles of Dharma. The story of Astika came alive in the minds of those who listened to Sotai's narration. It was a testament to the power of compassion, wisdom, and determination. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a warm orange glow, the listeners were left with a sense of awe and reverence for the brave young Brahmana who had risked everything to save his uncle and the snakes from an unyielding fate. In the sacred land of Prayaga, where the ancient sages Samavarana and Prajapati had once performed grand sacrifices, a new era of devotion was unfolding. Astika, a wise and revered sage, stood before King Harachit's son Janamjaya to extol his virtues and praise his sacrifice. With reverence in his voice, Astika began to speak. Your Highness, he said, your sacrifice is not inferior to those of our ancestors. It shines like a beacon, illuminating the path of righteousness. Your devotion is akin to that of Sakra, who performed 100 sacrifices, and yet your offering is equal to 10,000 of his Azteca, continued to speak his words, while the tapestry of praise around Janimjaya's sacrifice. He likened it to the great offerings of Yamaharanta and King Rantidava, each renowned for their piety and generosity. The king's own ritual was said to be on par with those of Maya, Sesivindiu, and Vaisravana, who had all performed sacrifices that would be remembered for ages to come. Istika's voice grew more fervent as he extolled the virtues of Janimjaya's sacrifice. He compared it to the great rituals of his own era, where kings like Yudhishthira, Krishna, Dwapena, and Rama had set an example for all to follow the sage's words. They did the picture of a king who embodied the ideals of devotion, self-control, and justice. His Azteca included his praise. He revealed the splendor of Janimjaya's rituals, who were said to be like the sun in their radiance and competence. He likened them to the great sages of old, who had traveled far and wide to perform sacrifices for their patrons. The bearer of libations, Adnai, was invoked that as a witness to the king's generosity and devotion. Azteca's words reached their crescendo when he compared Janimjaya to the gods themselves. He sought in him a reflection of Varuna, Ima, and Indra, each embodying the qualities of justice, compassion, and leadership. The sage's description painted a picture of a king who was both mighty and just, a true embodiment of Dharma. As Azteca finished speaking, he had gratified not only Janimjaya, but also the Sadducees' Ritwiks and the sacrificial fire itself. The air was filled with an air of devotion, as if the very presence of the king's sacrifice had awakened the spirits of the land, and in this sacred moment King Janimjaya beheld the signs and indications that would guide him on his journey forward. With a sense of reverence, Sata recorded the words of Azteca, capturing the essence of the sage's praise. For the sun beat down upon the sacred grounds where King Janimjaya had convened a grand sacrifice to appease the gods and vanquish his enemies. The air was thick with anticipation as the king's advisors, the Sadducees, whispered among themselves about the young Brahmana who had captured the king's attention. Janimjaya, eager to grant this remarkable boy a boon, turned to the Sadducees and asked for their permission. Though he is but a boy, the king said, he speaks with the wisdom of an elder. I desire to bestow upon him a gift. The Sadducees nodded in agreement, acknowledging that even a young Brahmana deserved the respect of kings. But just as the king was about to grant the boon, one of his advisors, the Hotrai, spoke up, cautioning against proceeding until Tesheka, the snake who had tormented Janimjaya's ancestors, arrived on the scene. The king determined to complete the sacrifice and bring an end to Tesheka's reign of terror, urged the Hotrai to hasten the proceedings. As the ritual progressed, Lord Teksha, a learned Siddha, revealed that Tesheka was indeed hiding in Indra's abode, protected by the god's boon. Janimjaya, his anger and frustration growing, commanded the Hotrai to pour libations into the fire, naming Tesheka. As he did so, skies above darkened as Indra himself appeared on the scene, accompanied by a retinue of gods, celestial singers, and dancing girls. Tesheka, anxious with fear, hid within Indra's garment, but was soon visible in the skies. Purandara, seeing the sacrifice, grew alarmed, and swiftly cast Tesheka off, sending him tumbling towards the flames. The king's mantra-knowing Brahmanas worked their magic, drawing Tesheka closer to the sacrificial fire. As the prince of snakes hovered above the flames, Azteca, a young Brahmana with an unyielding spirit, stepped forward and addressed Janimjaya. King Azteca said, if you would grant me a boon, let this sacrifice come to an end, and let no more snakes fall into the fire. The king, taken aback by Azteca's words, hesitated for a moment before responding. I shall give you gold, silver, kine, whatever possessions you desire, he said, but let my sacrifice not be ended. Azteca's reply was firm and unwavering. I do not ask for gold or silver, O king. I ask only that your sacrifice be ended, so that my maternal relations may be relieved. The king, moved by Azteca's words, repeatedly urged him to ask for another boon. But the young Brahmana stood resolute. As Sadducees, who had been watching this exchange with great interest, finally, in the midst of the grand sacrifice, Sonik, a wise and venerable Brahmana, turned to Satai with an eager expression. O son of a Sotat, he said, his voice filled with curiosity, I desire to hear the names of all those snakes that fell into the fire of this snake sacrifices of high. The narrator smiled knowingly and began to recount the tell of the serpents that had met their fate in the blazing flames. Many thousands and tens of thousands and billions of snakes fell into the fire, he said, his eyes scanning the horizon as if conjuring up the very scene, itself a most excellent Brahmana. So great is the number that I am unable to count them all. As Sata spoke, his words wove a tapestry of vivid images in the minds of those gathered around him. He began with the names of the principal snakes born of Vaisakai's lineage: Kaltasa, Manasa, Hurna, Kala, and many others, each one more fearsome than the last. These serpents, blue, red, and white, their bodies massive and deadly, had been helpless against the fire that consumed them. Like libations of butternicks, Sata spoke of those born in the race of Techsheka, Plakshandeka, Mandaleka, Ravaneka, and many others, each one a terror. To behold, their forms were terrible, their strength great, and their poison like unto blazing fire. As Sata recited their names, it was as if the very spirits of these serpents rose from the ashes, their eyes burning with the fire's intensity. The tale continued with the snakes born in the race of Theravada, Paravata, Parajita, Pandra, and Harana. These were serpents of great speed and virulent poison, capable of assuming any form at will and mastering any degree of strength. And then there were those born in the race of Kirivyat, Areka, Kundala, then I and many others, each one a marvel of power and ferocity. Finally, Sata spoke of the snakes born in the rays of Dhritarashtra, Sangakurna, Kithareka, Kuthara, and numerous others. These were serpents endued with the speed of the wind, and virulent poison, their forms a testament to the boundless power of creation. As Sata finished his tale, the assembly fell silent, lost in contemplation of the sheer magnitude of the sacrifice. O Brahmana, he said finally, thus: I have recited the names of the principal snakes known widely for their achievements. I have not been able to name all, the number being countless. The sons and grandsons of these serpents, born of fire and cursed by their mother's wrath, were too numerous to. The sun was setting over the vast assembly grounds, where King Janim Jaya's snake sacrifice had been underway for days. The king's enthusiasm had waned, and his heart was filled with a sense of unease as he watched the snakes being thrown into the fire. But then something unexpected happened as the king was about to grant Astika's boon. Techsheka, the snake that Indra had cast off his hands, hovered in midair, refusing to fall into the flames. King Janemjaya's curiosity was piqued, and he asked Sata, why doesn't Techsheka follow the mantras of these wise Brahmanas? Not potent. Sata explained as Astika had intervened on Techsheka's behalf, saying stay 3 times to prevent him from falling. The king was amazed by this turn of events and decided to grant Astika's boonness. The sacrifice came to an end. Plaudits erupted throughout the assembly grounds. King Janemjaya was overjoyed, and he showed his Ritwik Sadasyas and all who had come to witness the ceremony with wealth and gifts. He also gave a grand reward to Sudab, Lahatecha, the wise Brahmana, who had predicted that a Brahmana would interrupt the snake sacrifice. With the ceremony concluded, King Janemjaya sent Astika home, pleased and grateful for his role in saving the snakes from the fire. As Astika returned to his uncle and mother, he recounted every detail of the events that had transpired. The snakes, who had been watching from a safe distance, were overjoyed by Astika's bravery and asked him what they could do to repay their debt. Astika requested that those who would read about his heroic act with attention and devotion should have no fear of snakes. He also asked that anyone who remembered his name along with the names of Artaman and Sunada should be spared from snake bites. The snakes promised to honor this boon and vowed to never bite one who called out Astika's name. With his mission accomplished, Astika set his heart on leaving the assembly grounds, grateful for the opportunity to serve the king and the snakes. He ascended to heaven when his time came, leaving behind the legacy of courage and selflessness. As Sata finished reciting this tale of Astika, he said that the story had dispelled all fear of snakes from those who heard it, and so, with their curiosity satisfied, the assembly dispersed, carrying with them the memory of the brave and noble Astika, who had saved countless lives from the fiery altar. In the scorching heat of the Indian summer, Saunaka, a wise and venerable sage, sat under the shade of a majestic tree, surrounded by his fellow sages who had gathered for a grand sacrifice. The air was thick with anticipation as they awaited the completion of the ritual. As the priests busied themselves with their duties, the sages engaged in lively discussions about various topics rooted in the ancient Veda. Saunaka turned to Sata, a young and accomplished storyteller, son of a renowned sage named Sutta. With a twinkle in his eye, Saunaka said, O son, you have regaled me with the tale of the lineage, and I must confess that my heart swelled with joy at your words. Now I implore you to recite another story, one that has been composed by the great Vesa himself. Sota's face lit up as he nodded, eagerly sensing an opportunity to share a tale of epic proportions. As the days passed and the sacrifice continued unabated, Sota began to weave his narrative. The Brahmanas, he said, will often speak about various aspects of Vedic wisdom in between their duties. But one day Vesa himself recited a magnificent his story that would come to be known as the Mahabharata. Soika's eyes sparkled with interest, and he leaned forward, his voice filled with anticipation. Tell me more, Sonika, urged Sotai, about this sacred his story called the Mahabharata. It spreads the fame of the Pandavas, doesn't it? And was it not at the behest of Krishnadvipayana that Janamejaya asked for its recitation after the completion of the sacrifice? Sota nodded, and his hands began to weave a tale as ancient and majestic as the Himalayas. With reverence in his voice, Sota said, this his story was born from the boundless mind of Vesa, who had purified himself through the practice of yoga. The great sage's soul shone like a radiant sun, illuminating all that he created. I shall recite it to you now, O Brahmana Sonika, for your thirst has not been quenched by my previous tales. As Sota began to speak, his words poured forth like a river, filling the air with the echoes of a timeless talus. Edges listened in rapt attention as Sota's voice carried them across vast expanses of time and space. They were transported to realms both familiar and unknown, where heroes and heroines walked among gods and mortals. The wind rustled through the trees, as if it too was listening, carrying the whispers of the ancient ones on its gentle breezy. As Sota's tale unfolded, Sonika's eyes grew wide with wonder, his heart filled to overflowing with the beauty of the story. In a distant land, the wise sage Janamejaya had embarked on a grand endeavor, a snake sacrifice to atone for his ancestors' past transgressions. As news of this sacred ritual spread, the renowned Rishi Krishnadvipayana, grandfather of the Pandavas, decided to pay homage to the young king. Krishnadvipayana's birth was a miraculous one. Born on an island in the Yamuna River, he emerged from his mother Kali's womb as a fully formed being with the power to will his own existence. He spent his early years mastering the ancient Vedas and their branches, becoming the first of Veda-knowing ones to divide the sacred texts into 4 distinct parts. As the illustrious Rishi grew in wisdom, he begot 3 sons, Pandu, Dhritarashtra, and Vidura. To ensure the continuation of his lineage, these children would go on to play pivotal roles in shaping the destiny of their family and kingdom. Upon learning of Janamejaya's snake sacrifice, Krishnadvipayana traveled to the sacrificial pavilion, accompanied by a retinue of Veda-knowing disciples. As they entered the grand hall, the young king was seated like Indra himself, surrounded by esteemed Sadhusyas and Janamejaya, aware of his illustrious grandfather's arrival, hastened to greet him with great joy. The king offered Krishnadvipayana a golden seat, just as Indra at once honored Brihaspati. With the Rishi seated, Janamejaya performed elaborate rituals, worshipping his grandfather according to the sacred scriptures. Krishnadvipayana, pleased by the offerings, accepted them graciously and instructed the king not to slaughter the sacred kind. The Rishi was then approached by Janamejaya, who inquired about his well-being and asked him to recount the history of their family's past, a tale that would reveal the reasons behind the great disunion between the Kurus and Pandavas. Moved by the king's request, Krishnadvipayana directed his trusted disciple Vaisampayana to narrate the epic story. With joined palms, Vaisampayana began to recite the history of their family's struggles and triumphs, a tale that would span generations and reveal the complex web of fate that had led to the great battle between their ancestors. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Vaisampayana continued his narrative, weaving a poignant tapestry of love, loss, and loyalty. He assembled Sadhusyas, chieftains, and king listened with rapt attention, their hearts heavy with the weight of their family's history. In a grand assembly of Brahmanas and learned men, I, Vaisampayana, stood before my revered preceptor, eager to share the tale of the Bharatas with utmost devotion and reverence. I began to recount the story that had been entrusted to me by the great Rishi. This tale begins with the passing away of their father, Pandu, who was a just and wise king. His 5 sons, Yudhishthira, Dhamma, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sadhava, returned home to Hastinapur, where they were welcomed back by their mother Kunti. However, the Kurus, particularly Duryodhana, grew increasingly jealous of the Pandavas' strength, popularity, and good fortune. Duryodhana, with the cunning guidance of his maternal uncle Sakani, began to plot against the Pandavas. He devised various schemes to destroy them, including poisoning them as food. But the brave warrior digested the poison without harm, Duryodhana, then attempted to cast Bhima into the Ganges River, but he managed to escape and emerge unscathed. The wise Vidura, a loyal advisor to King Dhritarashtra, worked tirelessly to neutralize Duryodhana's evil plans and protect the Pandavas from harm as sacred. That king of the gods maintains order in the world. So did Vidura keep the Pandavas safe from dangers. The years passed. Duryodhana's schemes continued to unfold. He called upon his counselors, including Karna, Dasasana, and others, to devise a plan to destroy the Pandavas once and for all under the guise of a house of lac. They attempted to trap the Pandavas, but the brothers' intelligence and cunning foiled their plans. The Pandavas, with their mothers, Gedans, fled to Varanavada, where they lived in a palace of lac under the watchful eye of Turokana. Duryodhana spied, however, with the help of Vidura. They discovered a secret passage and set fire to the house, burning Turokana to death. The brothers then fled into the wilderness, where they encountered a Rakshasa named Hidimva, fought and slew the beast, and as a reward he married its sister Hidimbai, who bore him a son named Gatotkacha. Pandavas continued their journey to Akikikra, where they lived incognito as Brahmakarans in the house of a Brahmana. It was there that Bhima encountered and slew another Rakshasa named Vaka, freeing the town from its terrors. News spread about the princess of Panchala, Krishna's sister Subhadra. Being available for marriage, the Pandavas went to Panchala and obtained. The sun was setting over the kingdom of Hastinapura as King Janamejaya sat with his wise Brahmin advisor Vaisambhayana. The king's curiosity was piqued, and he asked Vaisambhayana to recount the epic tale of the Mahabharata in its entirety. Excellent Brahmana, Janamejaya said, "You have given me a brief account of the great deeds of the Kuras, but I wish to hear it all. I am not satisfied with just hearing the highlights of this magnificent history." Vaisambhayana smiled and began his tale. This Bharata is a sacred history that has been composed by the illustrious Rishi Vyasa, son of Satyavahai. It is a collection of 100,000 sacred slokas that will guide us on our path to salvation. This history is equal to the Vedas, holy and excellent, and it contains much useful instruction on Artha and Kama. As Vaisambhayana spoke, the king's eyes grew wide with wonder. He asked, "Why did the Pandavas suffer persecution at the hands of the wicked Kuras? Why did Bhima, with his mighty arms and strength, control his anger?" Vaisambhayana continued, "The Mahabharata is a history that presents an account of the gods and royal sages. The Silas, Kesava, the god of gods, Mahadeva, and the goddess Parvati. It tells the story of the birth of Kartikeya, who sprang from the union of Parvati with Mahadeva and was reared by many mothers." The king listened intently as Vaisambhayana spoke about the greatness of Brahmanas and kine, and how this sacred history is a collection of all the srutis. He said, "He who recites it to Brahmanas during the sacred lunations becomes cleansed of all sins and attends to a union with Brahma." Janamejay's curiosity was now fully satiated, and he asked Vaisambhayana to begin his tale in earnest. The wise Brahmin smiled and said, "I shall recite it all, O monarch. This history is the high and sacred science of Dharma, Artha, and Mokshas." The night whereon Vaisambhayana began to recount the epic tale of the Mahabharata, a story that would take him many days to complete. The king listened with rapt attention as the wise Brahmins spoke about the Pandavas, their struggles, and their ultimate victory. The sun had long since set when Vaisambhayana finished his tale. Janamejaya was filled with wonder and awe at the magnificent history that he had just heard. He knew that this story would stay with him, forever guiding him on his path to salvation. The king rose. In the ancient land of India, there lived a king named Aparakira, Vasu, who ruled over the kingdom of Chidai. He was a just and virtuous ruler, loved by his people, but also had a passion for hunting. As he grew older, he began to renounce the world, giving up his arms and dwelling in a secluded retreat, where he practiced severe austerities. The gods, led by Indra, took notice of Vasa's devotion and approached him, believing that he sought to become their leader. Through his penance, they spoke to him in soft tones, trying to persuade him away from his ascetic practice as a lord of the earth. They said, "You must protect virtue on earth, for it will protect the universe." In return, Indra himself assured Vasu that if he protected virtue, he would be rewarded with many sacred regions to behold in the afterlife. Indra also granted Vasu a crystal car which could take him through the skies like a celestial being. He gave him a triumphal garland of unfading lotuses, which would protect him from harm in battle. The king was overjoyed and promised to spread Indra's worship throughout his kingdom as instructed by Indra. Vasu planted a bamboo pole to honor the god Sakra, marking the beginning of a tradition that would be followed by all kings. When he erected the pole, it was adorned with golden cloth, scents, garlands, and ornaments. And the gods were pleased. Indra himself appeared in the form of a swan to accept the worship, blessing Vasu's kingdom with prosperity and victory. The king's son Mahabharat was installed as governor of Magadha, while his other sons Pratigraha, Kusumbamala, and Yadu were given charge of various provinces. They founded their own kingdoms and dynasties, which would last for generations to come. One day Vasu rode in the crystal car with Indra's gift, coursing through the skies like a celestial being. He was accompanied by Gandharvas and Apsaras who sang and danced in his honor. As he flew over his kingdom, he came across a mountain called Kalahala, which had been maddened by lust and was attacking the river Satyamati. Vasu struck the mountain with his foot, freeing the river from its grasp. The river, grateful to Vasu, gave him 2 twin children as gifts. The son became his general Simu, while the daughter Girika was married to Vasu himself. Years passed, and Vasu's kingdom prospered under his wise rule. However, one day he received a request from his ancestors to hunt deer for their Shraddha ceremony. While on this mission, he forgot about his wife Girika, who was pregnant at the time. The king's desire for hunting overcame. In the midst of a grand assembly, Janamejaya, a mighty king, turned to Vaisampana, a wise Brahmana, and asked him to recount the tale of the Mahabharat, those celestial warriors born on earth. The king's curiosity was piqued by the mystery surrounding their birth and purpose. Vaisampana began his narrative, speaking of Parashurama, the son of Jamadagni, who had undertaken a 21-year penance atop the sacred mountain Mahendra. During this time, the earth was bereft of Kshatriyas, and the Brahmanas, with their vows of celibacy, would only engage in conjugal relations with Kshatriya ladies during their fertile season. From these unions, many powerful Kshatriyas were born, ensuring the continuation of their noble lineages. The Kshatriya race flourished. So did the other 4 orders, Brahmanas, Vaisyas, and Sudras. Each followed their designated duties with devotion, and society was governed by virtue. Men went about their daily lives with restraint, never succumbing to lust or greed. Even animals adhered to their natural instincts, and the earth once again became a heaven for all living beings. However, as the ages passed, the Asuras, those mighty sons of Ditai, began to be born among various creatures: kine, horses, camels, buffaloes, rakshasas, elephants, and deer. These formidable beings possessed great strength and energy, and their presence soon overwhelmed the earth. They terrorized all living creatures, including Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, Sudras, and even the great rishis in their hermitages. The earth, burdened by this weight, sought the protection of the divine Brahman, the creator of the universe. The earth's plea was not unknown to him. He had foreseen the Asuras' birth and their intention to dominate the world. With a benevolent smile, the Lord appointed all the dwellers in the heavens, gods, Gandharvas, Apsaras, and Rishis, to take birth on earth as Kshatriyas, Brahmanas, Vaisyas, and Sudras. He commanded them to engage in strife with the Asuras, thus easing the earth's burden. The gods, led by Indra, accepted this noble task and went to Narayana, the slayer of all foes, at Vaikunth, seeking his guidance. With the divine Lord's blessing, they descended upon earth, ready to face the challenges posed by the Asuras. The stage was set for a grand struggle between the gods and the demons, with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. Vaisampana concluded his tale. Janamejaya listened with rapt attention, his mind filled with wonder at the majesty of. In the vast expanse of time, the universe unfolded its mysteries to the sage Vaisampana, who would recount the tales of old to the king. Among the sacred rishis, 6 stood tall as the spiritual sons of Brahman: Marachai, Anguras, Atrai, Pulastia, Poha, and Krata. These great sages were blessed with immense energy and knowledge, mastering the Vedas and attaining perfect. Senior's 3 sons, Vryaspati, Udathaya, and Sambharta, were renowned for their unwavering vows and unshakable character. Tresnumerous offspring were all conversant in the sacred texts, crowned with ascetic success and radiating inner peace. Pulastia's children, Rakshasas, monkeys, Kinnaras, and Yachas, roamed the earth, while Pulaha's sons, Salavas, lions, Himkurashas, tigers, bears, and wolves.
inhabited the forests spread to sacred offspring where the Vilcalius devoted to truth and vows who accompanied Surya in his celestial journey. The illustrious Rishi Diksha emerged from Brahman's right toe while his wife born from the left toe bore 50 faultless daughters. Diksha without sons of his own made them his putrikas, so that their children would belong to both him and their husbands. Diksha bestowed 10 daughters on Dharma. Kirtai Lechrai Dritamita Pushesrada Kriya. But Lajit and Malai, these wives of Dharma, were appointed by the self-existent one to maintain harmony in the universe. Chandra, the moon, received 27 daughters from Diksha, who became the Nakshatras and Ujjaina's guiding time in assisting the courses of the worlds. Brahman's other son, man who had a child named Prajapati, whose 8 sons were known as the Vasas. There, Dhruva, Samaha, Anil, Anula, Pratyasha, and Prahasana. Among these, Dara and Dhruva were born of Damra, while Chandra, Samad, and Swasana, Anila, emerged from the intelligent Swasa. Son of Dhruva was Kala, Time, the destroyer of worlds, while Sama's offspring was Varkas. Varkas begot 3 sons, Sisira, Ramana, and Kumara, also known as Kartikya, who was reared by Kritika and others. Kartikya had 3 brothers. Sakav, Isaka, and Nagamiana's wife Siva gave birth to Manodheva.
In the presence of King Janimjaya, Vaisampayana began to recount the tale of the birth and deeds of the gods. Danavas Gandharvas, Rakshasas, animals, snakes, birds, and all creatures that inhabit the earth. The king's curiosity was piqued by the desire to know about the lives of these celestial beings. When they took on human forms, Vaisampayana started by telling the story of Vikrachitaya, mighty Danava, who became known as Jarasandha the Bullman man. This powerful being was said to have been born from Dita's womb and had become infamous for his strength and ferocity. As he spoke, Vaisampayana continued to reveal the names of other Danavas who took on human forms, each with their own unique characteristics and ability. Sharanik said to another, son of Dita was known as Isabella. Among men, this powerful monarch was said to have been born with a fierce determination in his heart, which made him feared by all who knew him. Vaisampayana went on to recount the stories of Samaleta's transformation into Celia, Analeda becoming Drashtakitu, and Sivai taking on the form of Drumas. He continued. Vaisampayana spoke of other Danavas, each with their own distinct traits. Ayasira, Asosira, Esank, Giganamurdan, and Vigavat were born into the royal line of Kakea, where they became great monarchs in their own right. The mighty Ketuat, known for his grand achievements, took on the form of Metohius, a king with a fearsome reputation. Eazur, Swarvan, was said to have become Abresna, a monarch whose fierce deeds were whispered about and awed by all who knew him. Another Danava, Aswa, transformed into Azuka, a warrior monarch known for his unmatched bravery and strength. His younger brother Aswapatai took on the form of Hartikya, another powerful king. Vaisampayana went on to recount the stories of Vrishaparvan, who became Durkaprajna Ajeka, who took on the form of Sala, and Aswagriva, who transformed into Rakamana. Sushma, known for his great intelligence and achievements, became Vyadratha, a king whose wisdom was renowned throughout the land. As he spoke, Vaisampayana named many more Danavas and their human counterparts. Hara, becoming Suvanikama, transforming into Devadipa. Sarava, taking on the form of Paravakratha, becoming Parvatiya. Salaba, becoming Prahlada in the land of the Valakasta. In the presence of the venerable sages gathered around him, Janimjaya, the king, requested Vaisampayana to continue the tale of the Kuras. He had already heard about the divine incarnations of gods and demons, but now he desired to know the story of his own royal lineage from its very beginning. Vaisampayana began by speaking of Dashmata, the founder of the Parva dynasty, a king renowned for his boundless energy and unwavering protection of the earth. His dominion stretched across 4 quarters of the world, encompassing various regions within the seas, and extending even to the lands of the Mykshas. Under his rule, the land itself yielded abundant produce, eliminating the need for tillers of the soil or workers in mines. As Vaisampayana described Dashmata's reign, the assembly of sages was transported to a bygone era of peace and prosperity. There were no men of mixed castes, no thieves, no famine, and no disease. The 4 orders of society, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, performed their duties with joy and dedication, never seeking personal gain from their actions. The subjects of Dashmata lived in harmony, free from fear, as the king's benevolent rule ensured their well-being. Vaisampayana continued to paint a vivid picture of Dashmata's kingdom, where Parjanya, Indra, poured forth showers at the right time, and the fields produced luscious crops. The earth was teeming with all manner of wealth and animals, while the Brahmanas remained steadfast in their duties of upholding truth and virtue. The youthful monarch himself embodied the virtues of his kingdom. Dushmanta's physical frame was as unyielding as a thunderbolt, capable of supporting even a massive mountain Mandara on his arms. He was a master of 4 types of combat with the mass, hurling it from afar, striking at close range, whirling it amidst multiple foes, and driving them before him. His prowess in wielding all manner of weapons and riding elephants and horses was unmatched. As Vaisambhana's words conjured up the image of Dushmanta, the assembly was struck by his majestic presence. The king's strength rivaled that of Vishu, while his splendor shone like that of the sun god. His gravity was as boundless as the unseen, and his patience like that of the earth itself. The monarch's subjects adored him, and he ruled with a gentle yet firm hand, and during their contentment a tale of Dushmanta's reign had awakened a sense of longing in those who listened. They yearned for a return to such a golden age, where the land was fertile, the people were virtuous, and peace reigned supreme as vase.
The sun beat down on the forest as King Dushmanta, a lion among men, led his mighty army into the heart of the wilderness. The air was filled with the thunderous roars of the warriors, the blaring cantes, and the cacophony of drums, creating a deafening tumult that echoed through the trees. Hundreds of horses and elephants accompanied the king, their armor glinting in the sunlight as they marched towards their destinations. The procession made its way deeper into the forest. Beautiful ladies gazed down from the terraces of their grand mansions, their eyes fixed on the majestic figure of King Dushmanta. They marveled at his bravery and strength, likening him to Saika, the slayer of enemies and the wielder of the thunderbolt itself, with admiration and affection. They showered flowers upon the king's head, a gesture that filled his heart with great joy. With the blessings of the Brahmanas ringing out behind them, King Dushmanta led his army into the forest, eager to prove his prowess in battle as he rode his chariot, its wheels rattling out a staccato beat that shook the earth and echoed through the heavens. The king gazed upon the vast expanse of the wilderness. Before him the trees towered above, their leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. As the forest floor gave way to uneven terrain and scattered boulders, the air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers, Vilwa, Ark, Hedera, Apitha, and Deva. But the king's attention was focused on the task at hand. His army fanned out around him, a sea of warriors armed to the teeth. As they stalked their prey through the forest, King Dushmanta led the charge. His arrows flying swift and true as he brought down tigers and other beasts with ease. The once peaceful forest was now a battleground, the sounds of clashing steel and the scent of blood filling the air. The king's warriors moved with precision, their swords rising and falling in deadly rhythm as they cut down the denizens of the wilderness. Even the elephants, mighty creatures, but they could not withstand the onslaught of the king's army. As the battle raged on, the lions began to desert the forest, fleeing in terror from the warriors who had come to claim their territory. The herds of animals, leaderless and frightened, scattered in all directions, their cries echoing through the trees as they stumbled upon dry rivers and fell exhausted, unable to quench their thirst. The king's army feasted on the spoils of war, roasting the fallen beasts over fires lit by their own hands. The strong elephants, maddened with pain and fear, fled in a frenzy, trampling warriors beneath their feet as they went. In the end, the forest lay barren, and still its inhabitants van.
In the scorching heat of a desert plain, King Janamejaya and his followers emerged from the hunt weary, and parched their footsteps echoed through the barren landscape as they trudged forward, searching for respite. The king's eyes scanned the horizon, yearning for an oasis to quench their thirst and revive their spirits. As they traversed the desert, a verdant forest burst into view like a gemstone set amidst the arid expanse. The trees' branches swayed gently in the breeze, releasing fragrant blooms that rained down upon the king's head. The forest floor was carpeted with soft emerald grass, and the air vibrated with the sweet melodies of winged choristers. The male kokila and the shrill cycala, every tree, seemed to be adorned with clusters of flowers, each one of vibrant hue. that danced in the sunlight. The king's eyes widened as he beheld this breathtaking sanctuary. The trees' branches intertwined, forming a canopy above, while bees flitted about, humming in harmony. The air was alive with the songs of warblers. Perched on the branches, their sweet voices intertwining like the flowers themselves. The forest was a tapestry, woven from threads of beauty and wonders. They delved deeper into this enchanted realm. The king's party came upon an asylum of ascetics, a heaven that shone like a beacon of peace. The sacred fire burned within its precincts, casting a warm glow over the tranquil surroundings. The trees surrounding it stood tall, their trunks strong and sturdy, while the flowers carpeting the ground created a soft golden hue. A king's heart swelled with admiration as he beheld the sanctuary, which seemed to embody the very essence of nature's splendor. He saw numerous Yoas Valakilias and other men seated within its precincts, their faces aglow with inner light. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers, and the soft lapping of water against the shore created a soothing melody. Beyond this heaven lay another realm, an asylum that shone like the region of Brahman itself. Here the king encountered a diverse array of sages, each one immersed in their own pursuit of knowledge and spiritual growth. Some chanted right hymns with precision, while others sang summon hymns with perfect pitch. The air resonated with the harmonious strains of these sacred melodies, creating an atmosphere of peace and contemplation. As the king wandered through this hallowed place, he encountered Brahmanas skilled in various arts, from the creation of sacrificial platforms to the intricacies of logic and mental sciences. Some were experts in astronomy, while others possessed a deep understanding of the properties of matter and the fruits of sacrificial rites. The king's ears were treated to an orchestra of sounds, each one a testament to the vast knowledge and wisdom that resided in a dense forest. King Dashmata wandered alone, his retinue having left him at the entrance of the hermitage. He called out loudly, "What who is here?" but received only an echo in response. Suddenly a beautiful maiden emerged from the abode, dressed as an ascetic's daughter, and welcomed the king with reverence. The maiden Sakuntala showed Dashmata due respect by offering him a seat, water to wash his feet, and Arghaya. She inquired about the king's health and peace, and having worshipped him, asked for his commands. Dashmata inquired about the whereabouts of the illustrious Rishiken was Sakuntala's father. Sakuntala replied that her father had gone to fetch fruit, but would return soon. The king beheld Sakuntala's beauty, symmetry, and youthfulness, and his heart was sullen by her charms. He asked her about her identity, her father, and how she came to the woods. Sakuntala smiled sweetly and introduced herself as the daughter of Rishiken. Dashmata's curiosity was piqued, and he inquired further about Sakuntala's birth. She began to narrate a story from her past. According to Sakuntala, their father Rishikewa had once been approached by Viswamitra, another powerful sage who sought to know the secret of his birth. Viswamitra was concerned that Kewa's penances would threaten Indra's position as king of the gods. Indra, fearing for his throne, summoned Menaka, a celestial of Apsaras and a renowned beauty, to tempt Viswamitra away from his penances. Menaka was hesitant at first, knowing Viswamitra's reputation for being short-tempered and powerful. However, Indra commanded her to approach the sage with caution. Menaka recounted Viswamitra's numerous feats, including his creation of a river, his transformation into a Brahmana from a Kshatriya, and his protection of Maitanga, who was cursed by his father. She expressed fear at approaching such a powerful being, but agreed to do so under Indra's command. Menaka devised a plan, with Indra requesting the god of wind Meru to steal her dress while she played before Viswamitra, and the god of love Manmatha to help her in her endeavor. With these plans in place, Menaka set out to tempt Viswamitra away from his penances. As Sakuntala finished her story, Dashmata's curiosity was still unsatisfied. He pressed her for more information about how she came to be born as Kewa's daughter. In the tranquil surroundings of a sacred retreat, Viswamitra, a renowned sage with unyielding dedication to his penances, sat in deep contemplation. His austerities had cleansed him of all worldly attachments, and he was now a vessel for the divine. It was here that Menaka, the celestial nymph, chanced upon him. Her beauty shone like the radiant moon, and her presence was as gentle as a summer breeze. She began to playfully frolic before Viswamitra. Meru, the god of the wind, swooped, and stealing from her the delicate garments that danced around her like wisps of cloud. Menaka's cheeks flushed with bashfulness as she frantically sought to reclaim her attire, her movements, a testament to her innate modesty. Viswantra, his eyes burning with an inner fire, beheld this spectacle, and was struck by the nymph's faultless features and unblemished beauty. As he gazed upon Menika's form, now divested of its covering, Viswamitra felt the stirrings of desire. He beckoned her to join him, and she with a gentle smile accepted his invitation. Thus began their idyllic sojourn together, as they indulged in each other's company, lost in the bliss of their mutual attraction. Time passed like a fleeting dream, and soon Menika found herself with child. As her pregnancy advanced, she sought solace by the banks of the river Malani, which flowed gently through a valley surrounded by the majestic mountains of Himavat. It was here that she gave birth to a daughter, leaving the newborn infant on the river bank as fate would have it. The infant lay unharmed amidst the wilderness, guarded by a group of vultures who had taken it upon themselves to protect her from harm. The wretches and carnivorous beasts that roamed the forest did not dare approach the child, as if sensing the divine presence surrounding her. A sage with a heart full of devotion chanced upon this scene while performing his ablutions at the river bank. He was drawn to the infant's tranquil form, surrounded by the vultures that had become her protectors. Moved by compassion, Kenwa took the child under his wing and brought her back to his retreat. As he held the infant close, Kenwa reflected on the sacred texts, which spoke of three fathers: the creator of one's body, the protector of life, and the giver of sustenance. He realized that this child had been nurtured by the vultures in the wilderness, and thus she was named Sekuntala. Bird-protected years went by, and Kenwa raised Sekuntala as his own daughter. She grew into a beautiful young woman, unaware of her true parentage. When asked about her birth by King Dushyanta, Sekuntala recounted: "In a lush forest, King Dushyanta, a just ruler from the pure dynasty, chanced upon Sekuntala, a beautiful maiden living in exile with her father, sage Kenva. The king was immediately smitten by her charms and decided to marry her according to the Gandharva form of marriage, which allowed for unions between two consenting adults without the need for elaborate rituals or priests. Sekuntala, however, hesitated, knowing that her father would soon return with a gift of fruit. She requested the king to wait, but Dushyanta was insistent, assuring her that he desired her as his companion and that their union would bring him joy. He explained the different forms of marriage, citing the scriptures, and assured Sekuntala that the Gandharva form was suitable for a Kshatriya like himself. Sekuntala, convinced by the king's words, agreed to marry him on one condition: that her son, born from their union, would be his heir apparent. Dushyanta readily accepted this proposal and promised to fulfill her wish with a heart full of joy. Sekuntala accepted the king as her husband, and they exchanged vows according to the Gandharva form. As soon as the king departed, sage Kanva arrived at their abode, unaware of the events that had transpired, but the wise sage knew everything through his spiritual insight and was pleased with the union between Dushyanta and Sekuntala. He blessed their marriage, prophesying that their son would be a mighty and illustrious king who would conquer the sea and have an invincible army. Sekuntala approached her father, washed his feet in reverence, and asked him to bless the Parva monarchs, including Dushyanta's ministers. Sage Kanvara agreed, pleased with Sekuntala's selfless desire for the welfare of her husband and their future kingdom. With a heart full of love and gratitude, Sekuntala received her father's blessing, and the wise sage departed, leaving behind a legacy of wisdom and devotion. As the sun set over the forest, Dushyanta returned to his capital, accompanied by his troops, eager to take Sekuntala back with him. But little did he know that his union with Sekuntala would be tested by fate, leading to a series of trials and tribulations that would ultimately shape their destinies forever. In the heart of the forest, where the sun's warm rays filtered through the leaves, Sekuntala waited anxiously for her husband, Dashmanta. Their love had blossomed in this very asylum, tended by the wise Rishaikin, while the gentle breeze carried the whispers of their promise to each other that they would be together forever. As fate would have it, a miracle was about to unfold. Sekuntala's womb stirred with life, and she gave birth to a radiant boy. His eyes sparkled like lotus petals, and his skin shone with an ethereal glow. The Rishaikin were wise and compassionate, recognized the child's divine energy, and declared that he would be named Sarvadamana. The subduer of all, the boy grew at an astonishing pace, his strength and agility rivaling those of the wild beasts that roamed the forest. At just 6 years old, he could tame lions, tigers, and bears with ease. The Asylum's residents marveled at his prowess, and the Rishite decreed that it was time for Sakuntala to return to her husband, bearing their son as the heir apparent with a heavy heart. Sakuntala bid farewell to the only home she had known. Since childhood, Kenwa's words echoed in her mind: women should not live long in the houses of their paternal or maternal relations. Such residence is destructive of their reputation, their good conduct, and their virtue. As she walked alongside her son, she felt a mix of emotions: excitement for the future, trepidation about what lay ahead upon arriving at Hastinapura. Sakuntala's anxiety grew. What if Dushmanth had forgotten their promise? Would he acknowledge his son as heir apparent? Her heart racing with anticipation, she stood before her husband, her eyes locked on his face. Dushmanth, however, seemed oblivious to the truth. He rejected Sakuntala's claims, treating her like a stranger. The words cut deep into Sakuntala's soul, and for a moment she was consumed by grief. Her eyes turned red, her lips quivered, and her voice trembled as she spoke. Know everything, O monarch. How canst thou say that thou knowest it? Not thy heart is a witness to the truth or falsehood of this matter. He who being one thing representeth himself as another thing to others is like a thief and a robber of his own self. Of what sin is he not capable? Sakuntala's words dripped with conviction. Her voice rising in indignation, she invoked the ancient wisdom of the Vedas, reminding Dushmanth that marriage was a sacred bond between two souls, and that a wife was a man's most precious possession. The debate raged on. Sakuntala's passion reached its peak. Her words poured forth like a river. Each sentence: in the sacred traditions of old there lived a dynasty of royal sages whose genealogy was revered as a testament to the divine Vaisampayana. A sage of great wisdom stood before King Janamejaya, eager to recount the stories of these noble souls. The precious Vaisampayana began were 10 sons born to the earth goddess, all devoted to asceticism and embodying every virtue. They possessed the power to create fire from their mouths, which they used to burn away the poisonous plants and trees that had engulfed the land, freeing humanity from their grasp. From these practices was born Decha, a sage of great renown who would become known as the grandfather. He married Virani and begat 1,000 sons, all like himself in virtue and wisdom. Narada, the celestial bard, taught them the philosophy of Sankhya, guiding them on the path to salvation. Decha's desire for creation led him to father 50 daughters whom he appointed as his spiritual daughters, ensuring their sons would be his own descendants. He bestowed 10 of these daughters upon Dharma, the embodiment of righteousness, and 13 upon Kasyapa, a sage of great power. Chandra, the moon god, received 27 daughters from Deksha, who were tasked with measuring Tanakasyapa's union with his 13 wives, produced the Aditya, celestial beings imbued with immense energy, led by Indra, the king of gods. Vaivaswata, son of Kasyapa, and one of his wives became the Lord Emma, while Manu, another son, was gifted with great intelligence and wisdom. Manu's lineage would give rise to humanity, earning them the name Manavas. His descendants included Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and others, all born from this noble stock. As time passed, the Brahmanas merged with the Kshatriyas, and those of Manu's line devoted themselves to studying the Vedas. Manu had 10 children, including Vinda, Trishanarush, and Navaga, Aichvik, Kurasha, Saryatai, Anala, Prisha, True, and Navagasha. These sons were all destined for greatness, but their quarrels would ultimately lead to their downfall. Puravas, born of Ila, was a king of immense power and virtue. He conquered 13 islands in the sea and ruled with superhuman companions by his side. However, his arrogance led him to disregard the Brahmanas' wealth promptings and Akumara's intervention. The sage offered Puravas wise counsel, but the monarch refused to listen. As a result of Puravas' actions, the wrath of the great rishis was invoked, and he was cursed to die before his passing cure. The majestic monarch, Yataya, descendant of Prajapati, shone like Indra himself in splendor. His desire to know the story of his ancestors' union with Devayani, the unattainable daughter of Sakra, led him to ask Vaisampayana to recount it. Vaisampayana began by describing the rivalry between the gods and the Asuras, who often clashed for dominance over the 3 worlds. The gods, seeking victory, appointed Vrihaspati as their priest, while the Asuras chose Usanus, also known as Supra. The 2 Brahmanas engaged in the fierce, boastful rivalry, with Sukra possessing the knowledge of reviving the dead. The gods, fearing Sukra's power, approached Keka, the eldest son of Vrihaspati, and requested him to acquire this knowledge for them. Keka was sent to the court of Vrishaparvan, where Sukra resided. With reverence and humility, Keka asked Sukra to become his preceptor, promising to observe Brahmacharya For 1,000 years Sukra accepted Keka as his disciple, acknowledging that by doing so he would be honoring Gryaspati. Under Sukra's guidance, Keka began to conciliate both his preceptor and Devanai with kindness, music, dance, and gifts. As he spent 500 years in devotion, the Danavas discovered his intention and slew him, hacking his body into pieces. However, Sukra revived Keka using the sins of Sanjivani, and Keka appeared before his preceptor and Devanai recounting the events that had transpired. The Ishers repeated this act twice more, slaying Keka each time and mixing his ashes with Sukra's wine. Devanai was deeply grieved by Keka's frequent demise, but Sukra reassured her that it was impossible to keep him alive, as revived by his sins Keka continued to be slain. Devanai replied that she could not help but grieve for one whose grandfather was the revered Rishi Ainurus and father Vryaspati. In a scene of ascetic Meritus, the tale unfolded. The devotion and love between Keka and Devanai became apparent, as did Sukra's immense power and his willingness to revive Keka at the request of his daughter. The story came full circle, highlighting the complexities of the relationships between the gods Vaisuras and Brahmanas in ancient India. In this narrative we see the intricate web of relationships and the deep emotions that flowed through them. We witness the majesty of Sukra, the power of Devanai's love, and the bravery of Keka as he faced his fate multiple times. The tale is a testament to the rich tapestry of ancient Indian mythology, where gods Vaisuras and Brahmanas interacted in. In the celestial realm, Keka, the grandson of the revered Rishi Ainurus, was nearing the end of his vow of celibacy. As he prepared to return to the abode of the gods, Devanai, the daughter of his preceptor, Sukra, approached him with a proposal that would change the course of their lives forever. Devanai's words were laced with affection and reverence for Keka, whom she considered an object of great regard and worship. She reminded him of her father's esteem for his own father and emphasized their familial bond. "You are to me as dear as life itself," she said, her voice filled with longing. "As my father, Sukra, is worthy of your respect, so am I. Therefore it behooves you not to reject me." Keka, however, remained steadfast in his duty-bound resolve. He acknowledged Devanai's affection and gratitude, but explained that he could not accept her hand in marriage due to their familial relationship. "You are like a sister to me," he said gently, "and I must uphold the principles of a rishi. My preceptor has not commanded otherwise." Devanai's words turned from sweet entreaties to stern warnings. She cursed Keka, saying that his knowledge would never bear fruit if he did not accept her proposal. But Keka stood firm, convinced that he had done nothing wrong. "I have refused your request because of our familial ties," he said calmly. "You have acted under the influence of passion, not duty. Your desire will not be fulfilled." With a heavy heart, Devanai realized that Keka would not bend to her wishes. She watched as he departed for the celestial realm. His spirit, unbroken despite her curse, the gods themselves welcomed him back with open arms, hailing him as a hero who had performed an act of great benefit for them. The chief of the celestials, Indra, led the assembly in praising Keka's achievement. "Your fame shall never die," they declared. "You will share in our sacrificial offerings." And so, with his honor intact and his knowledge at the ready, Keka took his place among the gods, forever changed by the encounter that had tested his resolve. As he settled into his new life among the celestial host, Keka knew that his bond with Devanai would remain strong, though their paths would now diverge. He carried her memory with him, cherishing the affection they shared and the lessons they learned from each other. In the realm of heaven, a grand celebration unfolded as Keka, the brilliant scholar, had mastered the ancient science. The celestial beings rejoiced at his accomplishment and eagerly awaited the time for him to showcase his prowess. Mahabharat, accompanied by the gods, approached Keka and encouraged him to demonstrate his skills in battle. However, their conversation was interrupted by a vision of beautiful maidens playing in a lake within the gardens of Chitraratha. Gandharva king, the celestial beings changed into the wind, mixing up the garments left behind on the bank. When the maidens returned to collect their belongings, they found that their clothes had been jumbled together. Among them was Devanai, daughter of Sipra, who was furious when she saw her attire being worn by Sarmishta, Vrishaparvan's daughter. The two engaged in a heated dispute, with Sarmishta boasting about her father's superior status and wealth. Devanai, filled with anger, began to pull at her clothes. Sarmishta, fueled by her own pride, threw Devanai into a nearby well and departed, believing that she had silenced the Brahmana's daughter. However, Yeatai, son of Naasha, chanced upon the same. While hunting, he saw the weld and noticed Devanai lying within her beauty, shining like a blazing fire. A king approached her with gentle words, inquiring about her identity and situation. Devanai, recognizing him as a noble and virtuous ruler, revealed that she was Sukra's daughter. Yeatai, moved by compassion, lifted her from the well and returned to his capitalus. He departed Devanai, instructed her maid, Jernica, to inform their father about the events that had transpired. Jernica rushed to Sukra's mansion and shared the news with Kivia, who was deeply disturbed upon hearing of his daughter's mistreatment. Sukra, accompanied by Jernica, soon arrived at the scene where Devanai was being comforted by Yeatai the Asura. He listened as Devanai recounted Sarmishta's cruel words, which had wounded